Avoidant attachment often forms as a result of early experiences where vulnerability led to pain, rejection, or neglect. In these moments, the nervous system learns that closeness may not be safe, and that emotions should be hidden rather than expressed. Over time, this coping mechanism becomes second nature, causing the individual to push others away emotionally, avoid dependency, and suppress their own needs. But healing begins the moment one becomes aware of these patterns. Without awareness, we remain on autopilot, reacting out of fear and habit rather than intention and choice. The first step toward change is always self-observation without judgment. It's about noticing the subtle ways you detach from others, avoid difficult conversations, or downplay your emotions. It could be as small as withdrawing after a moment of closeness, feeling discomfort when someone says, "I love you," or intellectualizing feelings instead of experiencing them. These behaviors are not flaws, they are adaptive responses to pain. But by becoming aware of them, you start to shift from being controlled by your past to taking control of your present. Tony Robbins teaches that nothing in life changes until you make a decision to change it. That decision starts with acknowledging what is, not pretending to be more emotionally open than you are, and not blaming others for the distance you create. Real awareness means sitting with the truth of how your avoidance may be keeping you from the connection you deeply crave. It means asking yourself hard questions. What am I afraid will happen if I let someone in? When did I first learn that vulnerability equals danger? Do I really feel safer alone, or am I just more comfortable with what's familiar? This self-inquiry is not about overanalyzing, but about becoming curious. The more you observe without judgment, the more you gain power. You begin to realize that your patterns aren't permanent and they don't define you. They are simply signals, evidence that something in you wants protection. When you choose to listen to those signals instead of suppressing them, you open up the possibility for healing. You move from being a passive participant in your emotional life to an empowered creator of it. Awareness is not an instant fix. It's a practice. It means paying attention daily to your emotional responses, your triggers, and your needs. It means recognizing when you're shutting down and gently asking yourself why. This kind of honest awareness is the foundation upon which all other healing can be built. It is the first and most vital act of choosing yourself. Many people with avoidant tendencies carry the belief that prioritizing their own needs is selfish or wrong. This belief often comes from childhood environments where their emotions were ignored, minimized, or seen as a burden. As a result, they learn to silence their needs, stay independent, and focus on keeping the peace or staying in control. But true healing begins when you finally understand that choosing yourself is not selfish, it is essential. It's the foundation of emotional well-being, the starting point for building genuine connection with others, and the only way to break free from the cycle of avoidance. Choosing yourself means recognizing your inherent worth and treating yourself with the same compassion and care you've often reserved for others. It means no longer outsourcing your value to how others see you or whether they stay in your life. When you prioritize yourself, you begin to shift from a life driven by fear and avoidance to one led by authenticity and purpose. You start to ask, what do I truly want? Instead of what will keep others from leaving. This inner shift is powerful. It reclaims energy that was previously spent managing perceptions or building emotional walls. Tony Robbins teaches that the most powerful force in life is the power of decision. And one of the most life-changing decisions you can make is the decision to choose yourself not just in moments of solitude, but in every relationship and interaction. That decision involves setting boundaries that protect your peace, even when they disappoint others. It means saying no when something doesn't align with your truth. It means listening to your body, your emotions, and your intuition without pushing them aside for the sake of pleasing someone else or maintaining control. For avoidant individuals, this may feel unnatural or even terrifying at first. You're used to suppressing your needs in order to avoid vulnerability or potential rejection. But by choosing yourself, you're sending a new message to your nervous system. I am safe, I matter, I am enough. You no longer need others to validate you because your worth comes from within. This doesn't mean you shut people out. It means you invite them in from a place of wholeness, not need. You're no longer driven by fear of intimacy or loss, because your sense of self is no longer dependent on external approval. Choosing yourself also builds self-trust. Every time you honor your truth, you deepen the relationship you have with yourself. You begin to recognize your inner voice, respond to your needs with care, and show up for yourself consistently. This becomes a new emotional foundation, one built not on avoidance and control, but on presence and love. From this space, you can begin to open your heart again, not because you need someone else to fill a void, but because you are already full. And that is when avoidant hearts begin to truly heal. Avoidant attachment doesn't just live in your thoughts, it's wired into your nervous system, your habits, and your emotional reflexes. These patterns are often reinforced over years, even decades, and they don't simply go away with awareness alone. To truly begin healing, you must actively engage in the process of rewiring your internal belief system. This means replacing disempowering thoughts and behaviors with conscious, supportive ones. As Tony Robbins often says, repetition is the mother of skill. In the context of healing, repetition is also the path to transformation. The avoidant heart tends to carry deep, often unconscious beliefs such as I can't rely on anyone. If I get too close, I'll be hurt. Or love means losing myself. These beliefs aren't facts, they're emotional conclusions formed in moments of pain or fear, often during early relationships where connection felt inconsistent or unsafe. The brain, trying to protect you, internalizes those experiences and repeats them as emotional truths. But emotional truths can be rewritten, especially when you consciously choose to practice new beliefs through intentional daily habits. Start with simple, consistent actions that affirm your safety, worth, and capacity for connection. This could be a daily journaling practice where you affirm statements like, I am safe to feel, my needs matter, or I can choose connection without losing myself. These aren't just affirmations, they are new neural instructions. When repeated regularly, especially during moments of calm or reflection, they begin to rewire the way your brain processes connection and emotion. Another powerful habit is mindfulness, particularly body awareness. Avoidant individuals often disconnect from the body and emotions because it feels safer to stay in the mind. But healing requires embodiment. Take time each day to check in with how your body feels. Are you tense, numb, anxious, or closed off? By noticing these sensations without judgment, you begin to rebuild your connection with your inner world. This kind of attunement sends a signal to your nervous system that it's safe to feel, safe to be present, and safe to remain open even in discomfort. Emotional exposure in small, safe doses is also essential. It could be expressing a need to a friend, allowing yourself to cry without distraction, or simply staying in a moment of closeness without shutting down. These small experiences create new reference points, proof that vulnerability doesn't always lead to rejection, and that openness can be met with care. Over time, these new experiences form the foundation of a healthier emotional reality. Just like a muscle, your emotional capacity strengthens through repetition and care. The more often you practice being present, being honest, and being compassionate with yourself, the more those patterns become your new default. You no longer have to operate from the emotional programming of the past. You can choose new habits that align with the version of you who is whole, healed, and open to love. Change may not happen overnight, but with consistent, intentional effort, even the most avoidant heart can learn to trust again. For the avoidant heart, vulnerability often feels like a threat rather than a strength. It triggers a sense of danger, of losing control, of being exposed in a way that might lead to rejection or pain. This is not a weakness. It's a protective mechanism shaped by past experiences where opening up may have led to criticism, abandonment, or betrayal. But what once protected you is now limiting you. Healing begins when you recognize that vulnerability is not the problem. It's the pathway to deeper connection, authenticity, and freedom. It's not something to fear, but something to embrace carefully and intentionally. Vulnerability does not mean oversharing or rushing into emotional intimacy. It means being honest with yourself and others about how you feel, what you need, and what you fear. It's about showing up in your relationships not as a perfectly put-together version of yourself, but as your real, imperfect self. This kind of openness allows others to truly see you. Without vulnerability, relationships remain surface, level, transactional, or emotionally distant. For someone with avoidant tendencies, that emotional distance feels safer. But it also leads to chronic loneliness, dissatisfaction, and the inability to fully receive love. Tony Robbins often reminds us that the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. And the quality of your relationships is determined by how willing you are to be seen, to risk emotional exposure, and to sit in the discomfort of not always being in control. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's strength in its rawest, most courageous form. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you reclaim power over your emotional life. You stop running from your feelings and start owning them. At first, vulnerability may feel like standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure of what happens if you take the next step. But emotional risk doesn't mean recklessness. You don't have to pour your soul out to everyone. Start with small acts of truth, admitting when you're hurt instead of brushing it off, asking for reassurance instead of pretending you don't need it, expressing love or appreciation even if your voice shakes. These moments build emotional resilience. They teach your body and mind that vulnerability doesn't equal danger. It can actually lead to closeness, healing, and growth. Part of healing avoidant tendencies is learning that you can survive discomfort. You can survive being seen. And more than that, you can thrive in it. Vulnerability creates a space where real intimacy can grow, not only with others, but within yourself. It reconnects you to your humanity, your emotions, and your capacity for empathy. It turns the act of protecting your heart into the act of opening it. With each act of vulnerability, you reinforce a new belief that you are safe to feel, safe to share, and worthy of being loved exactly as you are. You stop hiding behind emotional armor and start living from a place of presence. That is how avoidant hearts begin to melt the ice around them, by daring, little by little, to be real. Avoidant individuals often become masters of performance, showing the world a curated version of themselves that appears composed, independent, and in control. This performance is not rooted in deception, but in protection. Somewhere along the way, they learned that being emotionally honest was risky, that showing too much would lead to rejection, judgment, or disappointment. So, they began to craft identities that minimized emotional exposure and maximized psychological safety. Over time, this mask becomes so ingrained that even they begin to mistake the performance for their true self. Healing, however, begins with the decision to stop performing and start living authentically. Authenticity is the act of aligning your inner world with your outer expression. It means your words match your emotions, your boundaries reflect your truth, and your actions come from a place of inner clarity rather than fear. For the avoidant heart, this can feel foreign. You've likely spent years being the one who's fine, who doesn't need help, who avoids conflict by staying emotionally neutral. But that performance, while protective, comes at a cost. It disconnects you from your own emotions, stifles meaningful relationships, and keeps you in a state of quiet discontent. Living authentically begins with radical honesty, with yourself first. It means being willing to look beneath the surface and ask, what am I truly feeling right now? What am I pretending not to care about? What do I need that I've been afraid to voice? These questions may uncover discomfort, fear, or even grief, but they also create the space for healing. Tony Robbins says, let go of the fear and remember who you are. That remembrance doesn't happen through perfection or performance. It happens through presence. When you start showing up honestly, you stop living for the approval or expectations of others. You stop managing perceptions and start honoring your experience. If you feel hurt, you say it. If you need space, you communicate it. If you feel love, you express it, even if it feels awkward or scary. These moments of truth build self-respect. They reinforce the message that your feelings are valid and your voice matters. The more you practice this, the more you start to attract relationships and environments where you're accepted for who you are, not who you pretend to be. Authenticity is not about being unfiltered all the time or wearing your emotions on your sleeve. It's about being real. It's about choosing truth over image even when it's uncomfortable. For the avoidant heart, this is a return to wholeness. You no longer have to hide behind emotional detachment or false strength. You realize that your humanity, your messiness, your fears, your needs, is not something to conceal, but something to embrace. As you release the need to perform, you begin to experience life more fully. You laugh more freely, connect more deeply, and trust more easily, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You've let go of the mask and stepped into your truth. And that truth is what sets you free. When an avoidant heart begins to heal, it's not just a personal victory, it becomes a ripple effect that extends into every relationship and space the individual inhabits. Healing isn't only about feeling better or letting go of pain. It's about becoming someone who can offer presence, connection, and love in a way that wasn't possible before. When you choose yourself, learn to feel your emotions, embrace vulnerability, and live authentically, you transform not just your inner world, but your external one as well. The impact of that transformation is powerful because your healing becomes a living example to others of what's possible when you stop running from yourself. Many avoidant individuals live with the silent burden of disconnection. Even if they appear fine on the outside, inside there's often a lingering sense of isolation, of not fully belonging, of watching life happen from a safe emotional distance. That distance may have once been a form of survival, but over time it becomes a form of self-abandonment. The act of healing reverses that trajectory. It brings you back to yourself, back into your body, your truth, and your ability to feel fully. And once that reconnection begins, everything changes from how you relate to your family and friends to how you engage with the world at large. Tony Robbins teaches that life happens for you, not to you. This mindset allows you to take your past not as a source of shame, but as a source of strength. Your emotional wounds, once addressed, become wisdom. Your defenses, once seen with compassion, become doorways. The pain that once led you to avoid connection becomes the very thing that fuels your desire to show up differently. You now have the chance to break generational patterns, to model healthy emotional behavior, and to create space for others to do the same. This is how your healing becomes a gift, not through words, but through example. As you grow into emotional openness, you begin to show others that it's possible to be strong and soft at the same time. You no longer need to armor yourself against love or control every emotional variable. Instead, you offer presence. You offer your true self, and in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. People around you start to feel safer, not because you're perfect, but because you are real. Your willingness to face discomfort, to speak your truth, and to stay emotionally present even in difficult moments becomes a kind of emotional leadership. The ripple effect doesn't stop with the people closest to you. It extends into how you work, how you lead, how you serve. Whether you're a parent, a partner, a friend, or a stranger, your presence has weight. When you've done the work of healing, people feel the difference. You're no longer reacting out of fear or withdrawing out of habit. You're responding from a place of inner stability and love. That kind of presence is magnetic. It draws people in not to fix them, but to remind them of their own capacity for healing and wholeness. When an avoidant heart chooses itself first and begins to heal, it doesn't isolate. It integrates. It becomes part of something greater. Your healing becomes a quiet revolution, one that starts within but inevitably shines outward. And in a world where so many are still afraid to feel, afraid to connect, or afraid to be seen, your healing becomes an act of service. A light, a reminder that no heart is too distant to come home to itself.